Buenas tardes a todos. Vamos a empezar el panel Herramientas para armonizar la circulación del papel y las audiencias digitales. Les pido disculpas por las demoras. Básicamente se deben a una pequeña tormenta que hay en la zona. Estoy seguro que han oído al respecto alguna mención. En el panel íbamos a estar 4 personas. Una de ellas, Lindsay, no ha podido presentarse. Y Steve Wagenlander de Brainworks tampoco pudo llegar. En su lugar va a estar un compañero de trabajo de él, Matt Griffith, quien va a estar presentando una solución a este problema que a todos nos aqueja. Desde hace un tiempo que se está hablando de estudios donde la gente que compra el papel no mira la página web y la gente que mira la página web no compra el papel en su mayoría. Lo cual no sería ningún inconveniente si no es que cada vez hay más gente que mira, se pasa a la web y por lo general tienden a dejar el papel. Esa es una ocurrencia muy común en todas partes y que a todos nos tiene muy preocupados. Esperemos que la gente de Brainworks nos pueda dar una solución al respecto, o una de las soluciones al respecto. Luego de Matt Griffin va a estar hablando Anders Gyllenhaal de McClatchy Newspapers, contando un poco su experiencia y cómo ellos han afrontado esta situación. Así que voy a cederle ahora la palabra a Matt y muchas gracias a todos por estar presentes.
Thank you so much. And as discussed, although knowledgeable about this topic, I am not an expert by any stretch of the imagination. So please bear with me, in light of the fact that Steve could not make it because of the weather. This is something that Steve and I had worked on together. Steve had worked at the Post and Courier, and Post and Courier is a customer of mine. I am the director of sales and marketing for Brainworks. So I am aware of what they were doing and how they went about it. Just speaking to Anders briefly before we started, I will be covering more of the business aspect of transitioning from print and to more online audiences, and then Anders will cover more of the content side of how that transition can be accomplished. So with that being said, is my presentation up there? Not yet. One moment. So while they're preparing that, as newspapers look to make that transition to digital audiences and growing their digital audiences as just opposed to print, they're becoming more and more reliant on their software vendors to do that. And ultimately, that's what Brainworks is. We're a software vendor. And we help newspapers make that transition from just focusing on print to really embracing more of the digital audiences as well. And better, how do they understand that audience and better market to that audience and track and monitor what's going on with that audience. So although Brainworks, just like most newspapers, have primarily been focused on print for 20 years, as a software vendor, we recognize the need to make that transition to print and digital as well, along with our customers. And when we came across a customer like Steve Wagenlander, it just made sense that we did some of that work together in collaboration. So oftentimes when newspapers look to vendors to help them achieve this solution, some of the things that they focus on often take multiple different components of software, like managing, like managing your pay meter, or being able to track which of your subscribers have access to which content. Things like, how do your users log in to get all this information? Oftentimes, if you're using multiple vendors, there is a need for them to log in, have multiple logins, and it's something that's become a real issue for users because they don't want to manage lots of different logins to access your system. So one system to maybe comment on stories as opposed to one system to gain access to stories. Being able to understand and better track how you're delivering all of these products to those different audiences. So whether it's an online delivery tool or a print delivery tool, how are you better prepared to manage that entire process as well? And then really understanding what it is that you do, how you go about it, and who is accessing that content and how they're going about it. I also put in one topic about providing advertising to those readers, because that also becomes an important part of reader engagement. So first I'll start with discussing the pay meter. I don't know how this necessarily works where you are. We refer to that by various names here. Sometimes it's the pay meter, sometimes it's the paywall. But one of the ways that Brainworks and Post and Courier went about that was to really focus on this to be embedded kind of in their core system. Since we are the circulation system for Post and Courier, we felt that it was our responsibility to also manage accessing this content, or allowing their users to access this content. So we really focused on it from really, even if they're logging into the website, they're just traditionally another subscriber. It's just a matter of the fact that they're subscribing to a digital product as opposed to a print product. By doing that, it eliminates kind of a third-party provider. There's no need to interface to another software system. It's just kind of embedded into the core software system that they're using already. Also, by doing this, it really allows us to track and monitor how they're accessing the website. A lot of times, one of the things that Post and Courier is doing is allowing them some content, but not all content. And based on your level of engagement with Post and Courier determines how much access you're able, or how much content you're able to access. And we're managing all of that by basically monitoring every page view that they're viewing, which then also gives us some really great analytics back on where their subscribers are going for this type of content. As far as the single sign-in goes, right now, if you're providing an e-edition or a replica edition, you've got paid content on your website. You've got sometimes a subscriber portal, so allowing people to come in and maybe start or stop their own subscription. Something Post and Courier is doing is something called membership benefits, which provide their members with additional information. And even something like a classified self-service tool. Basically, Brainworks and Post and Courier work together to put all of that in one system so their users can have one login and access all of that content once they enter the website. So we took it down from their subscribers having to manage 5 different logins as opposed to just 1. Something that the Post and Courier was doing that I wish Steve was here to talk about, because he's really the expert on it, is something that we call multi-product delivery control. And their philosophy in Charleston is to focus on providing really kind of this membership experience to their subscribers. So if you're a print subscriber, you may also get access to their website. You may also get access to niche publications. And really being able to manage all of that delivery in there. It's emergency. No problem. And then as opposed to someone who may only be a weekend subscriber, may get access to different types of information. So they created what was a relatively complex grid of being able to manage all of this multiple publications and how they're delivering them out to their subscribers. So again, whether it was digital subscribers or print subscribers or a combination of both, being able to really manage all of that information. They even focus so much on going down to niche product level like parenting and making sure that the appropriate audiences got the appropriate print or digital content. It was really a very interesting study that they've done. It was a lot of work, but so far they're seeing some great success with that. One of the other things that Brainworks focuses on is really this whole ability to understand and know what this data comes from. So being able to really get easy access to information. Where are these subscribers, again, print or digital? Where are they accessing this content and how are they going about it? And as newspapers continue to evolve in this area, it's important that they have reliable and relevant information very, very quickly. It's not so much the days where we might not know how we did delivering print newspapers until end of the week or end of the month. They need to know this information almost hourly. So Brainworks is compiling a huge amount of data and then presenting it back to their users in a way that's actionable and they can do things with it. So it doesn't look like we're able to see the presentation. If you would like an idea of what the analytics look like, I'll be happy to kind of show that to you later. And then also when it comes to digital ad serving, Brainworks has worked closely again with our customers and with Google DFP to really focus on making sure that we're displaying the most appropriate advertising to the users that are logging in there. Again, being able for your users to see relevant ads that relate to them drives engagement. So we're really kind of focused on working closely with Google and with our publishers to make sure that that is happening and that they're getting the appropriate level of targeting down that they need. Again, focusing on that engagement. So with all that being said, again, my name's Matt Griffith. I do have a table set up out in the lobby. If you'd like, you can stop by and we can chat about this more if it's something that you're interested in. And otherwise, I should be around a bit tomorrow as well. So hopefully we'll get to see you then. So again, thanks so much for allowing us the opportunity to talk about this. And I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
The issue of paid subscription, I think many newspapers in South America are looking deeply into that. It's a decision that not many have decided to go into it. But we've always been a few years behind you, technologically speaking, so we have a little breathing space to see how it goes for you guys. We hope you the best so that then we can use your experience for our benefits.
Very good.
Sorry. And Anders Gyllenhaal will now tell us what they've been doing and how they've been doing, which I find very interesting.
All right, thank you, Ernesto. Well, we are a slightly diminished panel, is true, but we're at least the strongest ones. We got here, and we also see that you are one at a time getting these emergency signals about how dangerous it is to be out there. So this is the right place to be for the next hour or so. So I'm the VP of News with McClatchy, and I think most of you are familiar with our company, but we are 29 newspapers, 150 websites spread from the Miami Herald, of course, where I've got to know many of you when I was editor there, to Sacramento Bee, Kansas City Star, Charlotte Observer, and we are 150 years old, and really though, all the action in many ways has been in these last 6 or 7 years as all newspaper style institutions are struggling with these questions that we've been talking about all weekend long and into next week. I thought I would talk from the news perspective about how these really dramatic changes in audience are affecting our work. And I thought I would start by painting 3 sort of pictures of things that are going on in different parts of our news operations that give you a sense of how we're approaching some of these questions. The first one has to do with the enormous focus on metrics and traffic and trying to understand both where our readers are coming from, who they are, and how they are reading us and sometimes not reading us, and what that whole relationship is about. So right now in 8 of our newsrooms across the country, we are tagging every single piece of content, not just in the traditional way to figure out, well, is this being read or not, but to understand how readers are looking at the distinctions between what we do. Here's a straight news story. Here is a deeper story that explores what happened. Here's a profile. Here's a brief. Here's a photo. Here's a video. And this is enabling us. It's a tool developed by the American Press Institute in Washington. We were the first big company to try to work with them and figure out If you tracked all of your content and watched how your readers were absorbing it, using it, what could you learn from that? And I won't go into a whole lot of detail right now what those lessons are, because it's still pretty early in the process. But it is teaching us all sorts of things that we wouldn't know otherwise. And I think that's an illustration of the kind of depth that we need to understand this much more complicated relationship that exists. The second picture I wanted to paint has to do with our video operation, and that's something we're setting up in our Washington offices. It's a big investment to recognize, as you've heard from several panelists here in the last day, that the importance of video is hard to overstate. It is going to be, and already is in many ways, the currency of the internet, particularly for readers a little bit younger than we are up here. And so if we are going to produce a true multimedia portrait of our communities, we've got to use video in a way that is different from this traditional broadcast style. So we've set this up, and what we have is a desk that's watching in real time, meaning what's happening right this moment as videos move around to different newsrooms. As one of them is catching fire, how do we get that spread across to others? How do we respond in the placement of that video in such a way that it will get even and more traffic? And you're kind of watching all this like an air traffic controller at an airport, trying to figure out, well, how do you guide, how do you use, how do you make the most of content? And there are a lot of tools out there that can help you, as I think everyone is familiar, follow in the instant development of how content is being used and how it is, how deeply it's being used, and how you should respond, not just in the placement of stories, but then in where do you pursue the story, what do you do with it, where does there seem to be interest. So that's the second portrait. And the third portrait has to do with social media in general, which is of course a huge part now of how our readers are coming to us. Between 2/3 and about half of our readers over the company are coming directly to our publishing platforms: print, web, tablet, phone. And the rest are coming in this now very vibrant bloodstream that's out there, that is the way media works. So either from search or from social. You can control search only to a certain degree through the way your presentation is operated, and certainly sometimes in what you want to pay. But social is the wing where you have far more control, and it has to be something that's built into everything that we're doing, because in effect this is how we go out and meet that audience and in effect bring them back. So this is becoming increasingly important. So at every one of our newsrooms, to paint this sort of third portrait, there's a team that's watching how social is working. And of course, social these days is primarily about Facebook and Twitter, in that order. For our experience, and I assume most of yours, Facebook is probably twice as important, and it creates a much deeper engagement with readers than Twitter does. I think there's starting to be some doubts about Twitter beyond a breaking news tool. It is unparalleled for breaking news. In this flooding story that we're watching unfold in front of us, you can see a lot of that across Twitter. But Twitter's value and how much of that traffic is really real and how much of it is really meaningful is a question mark, I think, that's hanging over us. So what do these three portraits have in common? It just, I think, makes the point that we're dealing with an utterly changed landscape from the way most of us were brought up thinking. And how most of us were brought up was focused almost entirely on the issues of coverage and what stories do we do and how do we reflect our community, and that was the focus of your newsroom. And then you published first in print, and then we had to learn to incorporate the web, which has gone pretty well, and then suddenly it's really 6 different platforms, the way I count them, because it's not just print and web, and responsive, as you talked about this morning, is hugely important for how we provide that, but also phone, tablet. Social is in effect another platform, and then video is in effect a 6th platform. So that's we expected people to come on those platforms, but now we have to turn it around and reach out. And it's not just about audience, because the 3 big portions of our business, audience, news and information, and advertising, are all 3 really far more data driven and far more about how do we target our audiences, recognize that they're this far more complex landscape that we've got to figure out where do we meet them, as opposed to expecting them simply to come to us. And so I think the question of how we do that, how do we recognize that the audience, and this is particularly true of younger audiences, expect us to come to them. You've heard the comment in so many different ways. It's almost now apocryphal that if there's important news I need to know, I expect it to find me. And so while that's not always going to work as a philosophy, it's what we're really dealing with, and I think we're seeing that more and more. So how do we operate in this world effectively, a companion for what Matt's describing on the business side? And there's just a whole lot of different things. I'll sort of skip through what I think are important, what we're trying to work on. One of them is to target the content itself and to recognize that we need more specialized content, things like we have political sites and apps that recognize that there are communities of interest that want the individual piece of information coming to them. Entertainment sites are obviously important things to do, are important. Sports, huge the world over. How do we approach and compete with basically a sports machine that you see on the part of a lot of national sites, ESPN, et cetera. And so the way to do that is with content that's provided. And in our company, that ranges from the Gamecocks, South Carolina, just down the road here, to the Miami Herald's Heat app, to Kansas City Royals in Kansas City, a huge surging team. So developing content that goes to those communities of interest are obviously important. And then there's the whole realm of reaching out and breaking news. I mean, look at how many of us are looking at our phones right now. Let's count. Almost everybody. And our phone is a companion to everything we do. And I think there was comments on anything interesting. No, it's more interesting than what we're saying up here. But the phone is there with you all the time. We have become addicted, wonderfully, to breaking news, right? You wonder, what was that? When this ripple went through on the emergency, what was that important? And so this is, I think it's in many ways a positive, but the question is, how do you take advantage of that? And so obviously there are a lot of different ways, but alerts and reaching out and newsletters, which are self-selected ways of reaching segments of the audience, right? You decide whether I want this newsletter on business or deals or sports or whatever, and so we really have to be prepared to promote them. And then varying the content on our platforms themselves. If you are like we are, in many ways we're pouring the same wine into all these vessels that actually are very different. And what you want to do on your tablet is different than what you want the phone to be able to do. It's different than what you want from the web when you're supposed to be working but looking at that during your workday or print. So how do we differentiate each of those platforms? I think it's one of the hardest things that we're up against, because we're having enough trouble just feeding all these platforms, and then when we overlay the need for our phone to be much quicker, don't waste my time, get me the news, I don't really want to read that deeply on it, although there's some trends that are going against that. versus the platform the tablet deeper reading. So trying to differentiate across the platforms, I think, is a big part of where we are, so that we are, once again, kind of coming back to the main point here, reaching this very different, very stratified audience wherever they want to be met, and that's basically our challenge. Two other observations to kind of conclude here is one, I think we're all struggling with the technology. So we have gone from, particularly those of us on the newspaper side, from being manufacturing businesses fundamentally when we were operating through a press, to being a technology business now that we're operating primarily through technology, with the press being a nice thing to have as a companion. So we've got to be technology companies. So who are we competing with as technology companies? Well, we're competing with Google, who you've heard a lot from, and Facebook and Apple, et cetera. So that's a very hard level of competition to succeed at. You heard Telefonica talking this morning about how they're trying to hire 5,000 data scientists and developers. How many of us, let's raise our hands, are trying to hire 5,000, not that many hands. How many are working on a dozen? 5, yes. That's the issue that we're up against. I don't think it's as pessimistic as all that, because what those companies don't have is a knowledge of the community, years of covering, reporters who have sources and who develop it. But we are competing against technology companies with tools that are not terribly well suited for this change that's in front of us. So we do have to, we've got to figure out ways of making technology a big part of what we're doing in order for us to succeed. That's a kind of a quick thought, throwing them out there. I think a lot about those different stories I tried to tell in the beginning. Those are happening all over our newsrooms, trying to figure out what works, and when they work, spread them across the whole place, in order, again, to be able to recognize that our audience, which is more engaged than it's ever been when you stop to think about it, our thirst for news, our need to provide news across, not just our own communities, but communities that are interested in wherever we happen to be publishing, is an unparalleled gift to us, and now we just have to try to take full advantage of that. Thank you.
I was just thinking of and listening to what you said, and in our case, El Diario El Día de La Plata, we have stopped trying to compete against developers. We are a regional newspaper. There is no way we can hire close to even 1% of those 5,000 developers. We started using a lot of applications for our website that were built by someone else. So in the end, what we have is a huge puzzle of different companies giving us little itty bits of, and our website is just one huge 1,000-piece puzzle. That really works or helps you with all that, and makes us concentrate on news and giving good stories to increase the circulation, to increase readership, and learning from what everyone else does and copy their good examples. That's the 2 cents I wanted to add. I would like to know if someone has any questions. Well, in that case, if no one has, por favor.
Hola, buenas tardes. Lo único que en Spanish. Hablaba del video y me interesa saber específicamente cómo trabajan en torno a la narrativa de los videos, digamos, si de alguna manera se sale del formato más tradicional, periodístico, expositivo, y si piensan en o están incorporando algunas estéticas más vinculadas con los youtubers.
Gracias. Mi español no es suficiente a preguntar en español, perdóname. But I think that what's happening in video is fascinating, and that we have inherited a video concept from television for the most part, which is a little bit detached, is a little bit, if it's a storm that you're covering out there, somebody standing out there with the wind blowing their hair, telling you how wet it is. And instead, the digital video that we're working primarily on is to put you in the middle of that and get rid of the sort of the middle man and woman, so that you're seeing much more closely what's happening. And we started really emphasizing video, maybe 10 years ago. And what we did initially was take your sort of newspaper mentality, which is to overtell the story and do long documentaries and, sort of think of National Geographic or whatever as your model, which was also wrong. The more time we put into those videos, the less traffic they would get. What we're doing now is focusing on two primarily types of videos, three if you add third party. One is to put you at the center of the news story, and these are often very short, minute and a half stories, and they get very good traffic, and that's, I think, a fundamental change. And then to tell stories that put you in the story of let's say sports, to give you the coaches after the game, interview, a profile, talking directly to that reader, and those work very well. And third-party video. So, as you've watched more in this country than in others, the police need to have cameras on everything that they do is a trend. Think of all the amazing video that is producing. So we go after that video, and you see all kinds, and that gets often, very strong, right in the middle of the fire. We had one just the other day where a fireman goes in to rescue a child, saves the child's life, brings him out. You are there through the whole time, that kind of video. And then also we still do what we call mini docs, which are longer, less frequent, but when you have that right story, and that's where the narrative can be much more complex. And if it's a good story, those will work, but you just don't want to overwhelm. I think the video reader, particularly on the phone, which is a very important part of video, needs to be short and able to absorb it while you're standing in line for your groceries. And it's accompanying stories. The more that they're attached, embedded in your story, and that's an alternative, not telling me the same thing that's in that story, that text story, but telling me something that augments it or adds to it or makes me hear the voice of somebody that's told in that story. That's where I think we're seeing the power of video. And don't forget, the difference between a story, text story, and video is that the video goes out and travels wherever it's attached by others, and the advertising travels with it. So we have a completely different dynamic underway than, and so you want people to steal and borrow and embed your video, and the longer and farther it travels, the better off you are. So I think we're learning, we're all sort of starting on video in some ways from scratch, and we're also buying video from good providers. Associated Press does a great job with video all around the world, and has produced, I think, puts you on the scene of the world's stories. We buy them from the New York Times, which is more back in that documentary style, but very well done. So augmenting what we do with what's provided by others. That was kind of a long-winded answer to your question, but there's a lot there, and video is actually, I think, a place where it may be very different in a few years from what we're thinking now. But if you can, I think, begin to experiment with it and see what works, you get instant feedback from your viewers on what's successful. And again, you know, the advertiser is desperate for video. You can't provide enough, and so there's a real value there in terms of the revenue that can come into. Video issues?
Just to add to that, you know, being able to track and monitor videos, what they're watching, how they're watching it, is becoming an important part, something we're hearing from our publishers quite frequently. The other thing that I'll just add to that, too, that we're seeing a bit with video is that as people are embracing videos more and more on their phone, that we're starting to hear a little bit from publishers about the need to, users will oftentimes never turn the sound on, sometimes with their phone. So being able to watch a minute and a half video and relay a story sometimes without any narrative at all is also becoming something that we're hearing more and more about.
Yeah, and that's because people are watching video while they're at work and they're not supposed to be. So you also want to develop a little cover that can go over that web or your phone and cover up. Oh, no, I'm working, Mr. Supervisor. But that's another story.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias. Creo que no hay más preguntas. Nos vemos hoy a la noche durante la cena. Me dicen que la comida está asegurada, que no es necesario practicar canibalismo. Quédense tranquilos. Bueno, ya podemos empezar con el alcohol, porque por lo visto el cóctel está preparado en este momento. Muchas gracias.
It's been a pleasure.
I'm sorry, I'm on this side of the microphone and I get very nervous.
Oh, it didn't show.
I forgot your name. I was like,
Well, I answered almost everything. Your name like that. Well, let's have a drink.
yes.
All right, we'll see you up there. Yes, I'll be up.
I want to see those metrics later.
Okay,
I'm
sure.
very curious.
Yeah, certainly. I'll be able to share those with you.